The old saying, looks can be deceiving, can go two ways. Sometimes you've got real performance hiding under a bland exterior, a wolf in sheep's clothing, so to speak. But then there's the other kind. The kind where someone takes an absolute potato of a car, slaps on a few cosmetics, and throws around fast-sounding words like rally or sport and hope nobody looks too closely to notice. Ford did exactly that in 1980, and the result was one of the strangest, most half-hearted performance packages ever bolted onto a car, let alone a station wagon. That car was the Ford Pinto Rallye Pack wagon. Now, the Ford Pinto was Ford's first true attempt at a subcompact car that hit the market in 1970, and we all know about the problems that it had early on. But those problems were eventually fixed, and the Pinto became a popular, though not beloved, inexpensive entry-level car. Late in the Pinto's life, Ford decided to throw as many crazy ideas at the wall as they could to keep the Pinto selling. These ideas generally didn't stick. The wagon version of the Pinto had been around since 1972, but the late 1970s introduced a new trend that Ford thought they could take advantage of. Before we talk about the full story though, I want to take a moment to thank today's video sponsor, Incogni. We talk a lot on this channel about cars that are repackaged and rebadged and sold as something they aren't, much like this Pinto. And that's exactly what data brokers do with your data and have been doing for years. And the sad reality is that most people have no idea it's even happening. Your name, home address, phone number, email, heck, even details about your relatives are being collected by these shady data brokers and sold off to scammers and anybody else out there. All of this is being done, mind you, without your permission. That information ends up in shady directories, on people search sites, and in all the places that you really just don't want it to be. And the number of data breaches happening each and every year keeps going up, which means more potential risk for your data to go ahead and get leaked. That's where Incogni comes in. Incogni keeps sending these ongoing removal requests on your behalf to keep you protected in the future. And Incogni keeps sending these removal requests in an ongoing basis to keep you protected. Incogni has a variety of plans available for different price ranges, but with their unlimited plan, what you're able to do is use their custom removals feature, which is when if you find your data exposed anywhere online, you can go ahead and send the link or screenshot to their data specialist, and they will go ahead and take care of the rest, removing that for you. And getting started with Incogni is incredibly easy, and it takes just about 3 minutes to get going. If you're serious about protecting your personal information, then right now you can use the link below in the description to save 60% off your first annual plan with Incogni just by using my link. If you're sick of these tech companies farming out your information to the highest bidder, then it's time you choose Incogni to secure your personal information online. All you gotta do is click the link below in the description to get started. And thank you to Incogni for sponsoring this video. But now back to our wonderfully odd little Ford Pinto. That trend was the custom van. People were loving the idea of a tricked out, customized van for cruising around with their friends. Custom vans were roomy, comfortable, had personalized styling that reflected their owners' tastes, and some of them, although not many, but some were pretty quick. Ford started building a cruising van version of their Econoline in 1977, complete with extremely loud multicolored tape stripes and rear corner porthole windows to try and capitalize on this trend. But a full-size van was expensive, both on the sticker price and at the gas pump during this era. So Ford came up with another idea. Convert their cheap subcompact Pinto wagon into something with the same styling as a custom van. They replaced the rear windows with carpeted side panels and the same tiny portholes on the side as these vans would have had. And they swapped the rear seats for a large one-piece seat that folded down flat. It was a novel idea for the time, and the people at Ford really did think that if they slapped minivan on their Pinto wagon brochure, it might be crazy enough to work. Initially called the Cruisin' Wagons, they launched in 1979, and they were an absolute flop. About 10,000 of these wagons were sold that year, so Ford came up with another idea. Why not pretend to make a performance package for the Pinto wagon? In 1980, the year after, the Rallye Pack was introduced for the Pinto's final year. Now, there was a version of the Rallye Pack for the runabout version of the Pinto, whose hatchback shape you could squint at and pretend it might be quick. But the Rallye Pack version of the wagon was even weirder, especially because with the name Rallye Pack, it had almost no performance pedigree. The sporty additions that were made to the Rallye Pack wagon were a black front spoiler, a 3-spoke steering wheel, and black side view mirrors that had a sportier, more aerodynamic shape. Other than that, the Rallye Pack Pinto wagons were purely a cosmetics package, which included a charcoal-colored front grille, black accents around the car as I mentioned, and some special graphics. The lower third side of the car was painted black, and a contrasting tape decal with the word Rally ran across the sides of the car. For all intents and purposes, the Pinto Rallye Pack wagon was another version of the Pinto cruising wagon with a few colors of tape and a little bit less of a gaudy appearance. The worst part though was that up through 1979, Ford offered a lethargic V6 option for the Pinto. That V6 made about 93 horsepower and 140 foot-pounds of torque, which could have been picked in the cruising wagon. But the 1980 Pinto, which included the Rallye Pack wagon, that V6 was no longer available. As far as I can tell, the only engine that you could get in a Rallye Pack Pinto was the pathetic 2.3-liter inline-4 that made 89 horsepower and 118 foot-pounds of torque. This, shoved into a 2,700-pound Pinto wagon, was a recipe for poor performance. It took the Rallye Pack wagon over 12 seconds to get from 0 to 60, and almost 20 seconds to run the quarter mile. Now those numbers are bad even for the late 70s. Now you could actually get the Rallye Pack wagons with a 4-speed manual transmission or a select shift 3-speed automatic. That transmission sent what little power that inline-4 made to an awful rear gear. Now, the information I found wasn't clear on what the standard final drive ratio was, but the brochure does advertise a high-performance rear gear for Pintos. But that was never available in the wagon. And even that, the high-performance gear in a Pinto was a 308. So the Rallye Pack wagons got something even worse than that. Maybe there were some special gear options that Ford didn't advertise, but I can't find any literature about them. So we're going to assume that the rear gear ratio for the Rallye Pack wagons started with a 2. The Rallye Pack wagons didn't get a special heavy-duty suspension setup or anything like it. They had the standard Pinto suspension on them, which meant independent front coil springs with a stabilizer bar and leaf springs in the back. By 1980, the front brakes were discs and the rears were drums, basically like in every other late model Pinto. The one bit of boasting from Ford that they were able to make was that the powered rack and pinion steering system gave the Pinto a 30.7-foot turn in diameter. But that was advertised as helpful for parking and not tuned for tight quartering at the limits of traction. It also probably wasn't that easy to see turning around in a parking lot with the Rallye Pack wagons because of those tiny porthole windows. 13-inch wheels were standard on the Rallye Pack wagons, and the interior was about the same as the cruising wagons from the year earlier. It was fully carpeted inside, all the way up and around those weird side panels. The front seats were high-back vinyl cloth combos standards, and you could get an all-vinyl seat as an optional extra. The rear seats could be folded down forward to make a big flat cargo space in the back, but from what I've read, the seats weren't very low, and they weren't very good for legroom either when they were fully extended, when they were in their upright position. There's a lot of bad about the Rallye Pack wagon, but at least it did come in a variety of cool colors. By the time we get to this point in the video, it's worth kind of asking ourselves the question, what else is there to say about this weird fake performance pack that was offered on an already weird wagon? Well, you probably wouldn't be surprised to find out that Ford had trouble selling them. The cruising wagon had pretty lackluster sales of under 4,000 units in 1980, and sources suggest that the Rallye Pack sold even worse. Now, I couldn't find hard numbers on Rallye Pack wagon production, but because the Pinto was killed off the next year and replaced with the Escort, 1980 was the only year the Rallye Pack was made, so there's probably only a couple thousand of them that were ever made. But nowadays, considering how little care people took of their Pintos, especially the wagons, it's pretty hard to find any nice Pinto wagon, let alone the one-year-only Rallye Pack cars. they are an oddity and they really don't come up for sale that often. But if you are for some reason looking for one, you can probably find one of the nicest ones ever for about 10 grand or so, because the desirability just isn't there. If you were to buy a rally pack car though and redo it with a modern Ford EcoBoost engine, some good suspension, and a much better rear gear ratio in it, it probably could be a pretty fun cruiser to have. But even around the 10 grand mark, there are much better cars to actually go ahead and purchase and restore than a rally pack wagon. So I doubt many people will make the jump to do it. And let me know too if you've ever even seen one of these cars or knew they existed, because before making this video and doing the research, I had no idea this car existed either until I stumbled upon one on Marketplace that started me making this video. Thank you for watching another episode of Rare Cars though. If you want to see more of these short form documentaries, please make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications as I upload at least once per week. Thank you again, and I will see you all in the next one, enthusiasts.